Côte d'Azur in France, and I'm happy to be a moderator of our seminar today. So first of all, I would like to thank European Nuclear Society for this opportunity to organize this event. This event is about leadership and aligning leadership with organizational dynamics. Leadership becomes one of the subject with increasing interest from professionals in nuclear sector. International safety institutions, but also practitioners, highlight their interest through recent publication of some requirements, guidelines, but also internal training to accompany the nuclear sector actors in their leadership development. And we can also note the emergence of considerable leadership training programs created both within organization, but also with external experts as well. So the objective of this seminar is to discuss together what defines leadership, why leadership should be aligned with organizational dynamics, and how this interplay could be done. And finally, how it's influenced leadership training design. So we hope, based on this discussion, have a very valuable insight from different representatives. And today we have a great opportunity to discuss this subject with three outstanding keynote speakers. So I'm happy to introduce Renata, Kaminska, Lande, and Vanessa, Locke. So Renata is Professor of Strategy and Innovation at SKEMA Business School, University Côte d'Azur. She is Scientific Director of the Master of Research jointly run by University and SKEMA. Her research, published in many international journals, revolves around innovation, leadership for safety, and organizational dynamics. Lisa is Senior Nuclear Human Resource Development Expert at International Atomic Energy Agency. Lisa is specialized nuclear organization experience. Lisa has 15 years global experience as a leadership coach, consultant, and program development manager. Her targeted emphasis is on safety, leadership, organizational resilience, and performance. And Vanessa is the Organizational Effectiveness Manager at the Institute of Nuclear Power Organization Operations. INPO, sponsored by the commercial nuclear industry, is an independent non-profit organization with mission to promote the highest level of safety and reliability, to promote excellence in the operation of commercial nuclear power plants. So let me briefly introduce the format of our meeting. We will have two parts. First, each keynote speakers will have around 20 minutes of presentation. I will try to be a timekeeper as well. So 3 minutes before, I will just give you a small sign that time will be close to finish. And then the second part, we would like to leave time for an open discussion with the audience around the question on leadership challenges, expectation in your organization about leadership, and about leadership training. So thank you very much once again to being here, and I happy to join this wonderful event, and I will give the floor to Renata for first presentation.
Thank you. You just stressed me. A wonderful event. Well, I would like to thank you for the invitation to this workshop. And it is really a pleasure, privilege, and honor to be here. Because we have an opportunity to present both the results of our research, partly conducted in the scope of Natalia's PhD, and also an example of leadership training that we have developed on the basis of the research that we have developed. Or conducted. Okay, so the main focus of my presentation today will be to convince you that in order to increase the effectiveness of leadership trainings, we need to take into consideration the complexity of organizational dynamics. So my presentation will be structured around these three questions or topics or issues. So the first will be defining leadership. The second will be to kind of take a closer look at the interplay between the relationship between leadership and the different types of organizational dynamics that need to be taken into consideration. And then I will try to show you an example of leadership training that we have designed in the scope of our project. And the aim was to design a training that is comprehensive and at the same time that takes into consideration the complexity of this process, which we call leadership. So the first question, what is leadership? In order to answer this question, we went through the different theories. We analyzed everything that the different researchers, scholars, and practitioners had to say about leadership. And the first thing that we have done is we have tried to understand the relationship between management and leadership. So there has been for a number of years and in many minds an overlap between these two concepts or these two processes. We know that these two processes are complementary, but we made an effort to conceptually disambiguate them. So basically to make a long story short, we can say that management is a process that is very much task-oriented, and it involves activities such as designing organizations, allocating tasks, and implementing coordination mechanisms. It also involves incentives and communication systems planning activities, budgeting, staffing, controlling, and problem solving of different type. Now, when it comes to leadership, it becomes clearer and clearer that leadership is different from management in its focus on relationships. In relationships which result in the influence process. So basically leadership, as in contrast to management, is more focused on building interpersonal relationships, sharing a vision, and also giving a sense to the different management systems, to actually what managers do. So it involves setting direction, aligning people, motivating them, and so on. So it's very important to make this distinction because it will allow us to better understand what leadership is and how to create more effective leadership trainings. So previously, traditionally, leadership theory has focused on leaders' characteristics and leaders' behaviors. So we can say that in general, it used to focus a lot on what we call the leadership styles. And the review of the literature of the different theories highlighted many limits to the style-based theories of leadership. So what we conclude from this overview of the different theories is that basically there's no one best way in exerting leadership. These theories also conclude that there is no, that the different styles that leaders adopt, evolve and have to adapt to specific contexts. Nevertheless, it is important to highlight that these theories tend to fail to explain the link between the leader characteristics and behaviors or styles of leadership and the organizational outcomes, the desired outcomes. So in the end, in concluding this review of the literature, we can say that the leader's direct influence on organizational outcomes, on organizational performance, tends to be somewhat overestimated. And that's why many scholars now highlight the need to take into consideration the complex, contingent, and dynamic nature of leadership. It's not an easy task, but there is a big call for the need to provide this understanding of the causal explanation of leadership influence on outcomes. So first, in our research, we disambiguated management from leadership. But obviously, these two processes are very much linked together. And they are linked together through a more, I would say, contemporary approach to leadership, which we call, and the scholars call, the processual approaches to leadership. These processual approaches to leadership are proposed, are put forth as the ones who are more capable of fully acknowledging the complex and contingent nature of leadership. So to make a long story short, from this perspective, leadership is defined as a process of influencing individual and collective cognition and behaviors, so how people think and how they behave, what they do, to satisfy or that satisfy management expectations. And this is how management processes and leadership processes appear as very closely related. So why this processual approach to leadership in a little bit more detail? First of all, what does it mean? What is the nature of leadership viewed as a process? So leadership as a process is definitely goal-oriented. It's a social process. We highlighted the importance of the influence that leaders exert on their subordinates. It's also a very dynamic process. It changes over time, and it's embedded in organizational dynamics, something that I will focus on a little bit more. But something that is interesting and important to stress here is that leadership is difficult to study. It's difficult to study because it's both an observable and a non-observable process. Certain things can be seen, others cannot. So opening the black box of influence involves searching for mechanisms that explain the causal relationships between inputs, which are leaders' behaviors, and the outputs, which manifest themselves in the form of organizational performance. And this following the input process output logic. So the implication of the processual view of leadership is that the influence process that leaders exert is no longer seen as just the manifestation of leaders' personal ability, or in other words, his or her styles or traits of personality. So effective leadership, and understanding what effective leadership requires understanding of this influence process. In other words, the causal relationship between leaders' behaviors and practices, which is basically the how of the whole process, how we do things, how things happen, and the expected behaviors to increase desired organizational goals. So what we would like to accomplish. And the difficult part is the how part. And in the how part, we need to try to better understand the mechanisms that explain this causal relationships between inputs and outputs. And it has been a great challenge to scholars and also to practitioners. So influence, going back to this influence and then to the process view of leadership, influence has been found to be embedded in very complex organizational dynamics. The complex organizational dynamics is by definition a lot of things interacting together. And we have tried in our research project to really try to focus on these causal mechanisms of influence. So the second part of this presentation will focus on the interplay between leadership and organizational dynamics. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty of what we want to find out today. So what is the consequence of acknowledging these complex organizational dynamics? First of all, we have to start by stressing the idea that the process approaches to leadership or process theories on leadership stress the need to acknowledge rather than to reduce the complexity of the world. So too many times we have a tendency to try to simplify the reality that is complex. Why do we do it? Simply because it's difficult to deal with very, very complex things happening in organizations. So acknowledging the complexity of organizational dynamics invites us to recognize that organizations are composed of a very large number of different elements, entities. All of them are in constant interaction and they evolve constantly, leading to new things that emerge. We call it emergence, but it's basically new order that emerges, new things, new solutions, new problems, and so on. It also invites us to think of organizations in terms of the multiplicity and uncertainty of interactions between the many different elements, technological, human, and organizational factors, for example. So all these things interact, and it's very, very difficult to predict the direct relationship between what we do and what really comes out of the managerial leadership actions. So complexity also implies this circular causality with many feedback loops, which result in uncertainty. All of this highlights the need for constant learning, constant innovation, and search for new solutions, but in real time. Because things change and they change very fast, we need to be able to have organizations that are capable of solving solutions that arise in real time. So as a consequence, leadership is considered to be not only an act of direct influence on subordinates, but it's part, or it's an element of a larger, complex web of influence among many different interacting forces. So in order to make sense out of it and to be able to act, we need to better understand the mechanisms of leaders' influence in the context of this web of interacting forces, which we call complex organizational dynamics. So this brings us to this idea of the mechanisms of leadership influence. So the processual approach, as I said, focus on this logic of input, process, output model. And
Renata, just a reminder that you have only 3 minutes.
I have only 3 minutes left. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the sense-giving, mutual trust, motivating, and learning are these mechanisms that we have identified. They all interact, reinforce, sometimes counteract one another, and so on. So the consequence for the effective leadership training. It has been noticed by very renowned institutions such as Harvard Business School that basically training for leadership often fails to reach its goals, and these schools, these institutions progressively and increasingly invite pedagogical approaches that allow to acknowledge these complex interactions in organizations. So I just wanted to finish by giving you an example of a leadership training that was designed in the framework of the ELS project, European Leadership for Safety Education. This training has been designed around 3 modules. The first one focuses on what I have previously defined as the what problem. So basically the aim that we want to achieve. The second module focuses on the how issue that I've mentioned before, which is really placing leadership in the context of organizational dynamics, focusing on understanding the mechanisms of leadership and practices that leaders implement every day, and on developing the leadership for safety capability that is enriched by the broader understanding of what leadership is and how it interacts with these organizational dynamics. The third module in this leadership training is taking time to developing efficient leadership practices for improving safety in the nuclear sector, because this is the goal that our leadership training aims. So we have developed a very innovative pedagogical method, which is composed of 3 elements as well. The first one is MOOC, where participants basically revise all the elements that they need to understand prior to the face-to-face training, which aims at developing a more all these concepts more in depth through reflexive debriefing and case studies, a lot of case studies. And that the third element in this training is developing an individual tutored project, which actually aims at implementing the knowledge that the participants have acquired, developed, and assimilated in their individual project, which is embedded in their own context, organizational context. So I hope that I have not overrun my time, but thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer all your questions at the end.
Okay, thank you very much, Renata. No, it's perfect for timekeeping. So now I'm glad to invite the next keynote speaker.
So I stopped sharing.
Yeah, I think Lisa.
Okay, let me pull mine up. Come on. And I believe you're seeing my slides, yeah?
Great.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Super. Welcome all. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you so much, ENS, for inviting me. Renata, great talk. As the audience will hear, there are many complementary aspects of my presentation to Renata's, yet I hope to introduce a few unique concepts as well. I too, this is just me, and I was well introduced already, but at least it's a part of the slide deck. These were the questions that I think all of the panelists are looking to address for us, and I'll take them through one by one. I'll also talk about what defines leadership, quite similarly to Renata, and what that relationship between leadership and dynamics is. And then finally, how, in my estimation and view, and 30 years experience developing leadership programs, might be applied today. So first, I think a nice place to start when we talk about what defines leadership is to introduce or reintroduce the term VUCA. Leadership is perfectly situated to deal with VUCA. By the way, VUCA was first coined by Warren Bennis and Bert Nannis, incredible industrial organizational psychologists, well back in 1987. And what they had found is that the world was progressing at such a steady and ever-increasing rate that it brought in a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And as a process to get through this or navigate VUCA, this volatile, uncertain, and complex, ambiguous situation, required an even greater demand on leadership. And as I talk about leadership, and also as Renata referred to as well, leadership itself is about dynamic movement. And that is why leadership does position an organization to navigate the uncertainty that exists. By the end of my brief presentation, I hope it's clear how particularly in such a necessarily stable environment as the nuclear industry, VUCA is not a friend. And so we cannot ignore the fact that VUCA exists, and it's even beneficial for the purposes of innovation and change. I mean, what does dynamic mean anyway? It's about constant change. It's about constant activity and progress. So leadership is all about that. It resonates well with VUCA, not so much in a management paradigm. So I'm just going to cover a few core items related to leadership. I usually can do a whole hour on this, actually whole workshops on this. But just to give you a sense, I mean, I started working in this paradigm over 30 years ago. You know, I was noticing as I did my global leadership programs for Fortune 100 companies that leaders, as we characterize them, were really good at having a vision and seeing big pictures and relationships and empowering and engaging others. And as Renata talked about, she mentioned the relational aspects of that. Yet it's not only the human relations, it's also relations of data points and how leaders, and again, I'm glomming all of these individuals who do these aspects well, kind of formulate the world and make sense of the world, and seeing these linkages between disparate and also concrete items. We'd call that data in a management world. That's data to a leader. And so this way of seeing the world and the way of navigating and the way of establishing and working off of relationships requires and calls upon at the same time a very adaptive approach. It's nonlinear, it never repeats. So the feedback loops, well, yeah, there's feedback loops, but they are never repetitive. And that's what complexity is. Complexity is this always moving, always shaping and shifting dynamic. And again, leadership is well positioned to do this well. The other thing, if we're talking about safety culture, which of course is so big in nuclear, we have to talk about psychological psychological safety and Amy Edmondson's work, which takes safety from an unseen space that is very real too. How do we create a space of feeling safe, psychological or emotional safety? Leaders care about this, and they're effective at developing it because they hone in on those subtle messages that humans and the world are constantly sharing. So let's just contrast that with management. And by the way, right out of the gate, if you don't, capture everything of what I say in this short presentation, recognize that we cannot optimize leadership if we do not optimize management, and vice versa. So I am an advocate, it may not be shared, but I will never lead or create a leadership development program that does not integrate the aspects of management. We need both to optimize performance. But management operates differently. It is about stability, reliability, consistency, proceduralization. It's about discrete, measurable entities, right? And we see that embedded within the organizations, particularly in high hazard, where all of those nailed down pieces give us a sense of being physically safe, a sense and a reality. So it's critically important as we develop and further nurture leadership in the organization that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we recognize the very necessary role management plays. So just as leadership lifts and inspires and moves forward, management grounds and it stabilizes, okay? It's about, you can recognize managers, and I did for these many years of doing leadership and management development coursework, that they usually are really good at defining agendas and have action plans. They rely heavily on data and metrics, and also define very detailed and procedural elements. Yet if they only come at the problem space with this domain, they miss the opportunity, obviously, to engage, to see linkages, to have a future plan to get to, and vice versa. If leaders do not bring these kind of grounding capabilities in, they're sub-optimizing the full performance of their organization and of themselves and of the team. So to bring it to a human base, I am much more of a leadership viewer of the world. I see big pictures and linkages, yet I recognized as a global leader of psychologists, they required some concrete grounding, action steps, etc. So I had to develop the strength of management in order to optimize my naturally occurring leadership skills. So I hope that's clear. All right, so moving forward, I've already said it's one thing to be safe, a management's focus, and it's another to feel safe, a leader's focus, put simply. So, sorry, that was that. I'm looking at my screen advancer, so I think you're seeing this now. Okay, so let's move on to another aspect of the panel discussion of the relationship between organizational dynamics and leadership. And I want to introduce, you're going to see the parallels. I want to talk about some work by Holling way back in the 80s. And he discriminated between technological and ecological resilience. So hang with me, it's going to make sense. In technological systems and paradigms, we operate in very linear, discrete modalities. When we think of complicated and simple, we see discrete elements. Think of the internal workings of a watch. They are clearly binary. They repeat their activities. It works like clockwork, right? Can you kind of visualize that? It's all very clear and compartmentalized, and clarity is there. So these are fixed rules, are predictable, constant, stable, again, reversible, and it's about efficiency. Now, if we contrast that to an ecological system, nonlinear, relational, complex, and complex again means that everything is interconnected and it rarely repeats. Humans and living organisms are ecological by nature, and to force them into a technological system or paradigm solely can be actually unsafe. And this is the opportunity for the nuclear organization to recognize, how do we allow in a healthy and safe way to introduce ecological elements? That's what drives innovation, right? This is the complex nature of things. This is where we learn through failure. How do we ensure that we know when to operate ecologically well and when technologically? And if you think about the world in general of the organization, many operate within a technological paradigm. It's time to change that. And this might be the silver lining, if there is one, of the pandemic. It has forced us to recognize that being able to navigate in uncertainty, complex environments actually increases self-reliability, relationships among others, an ability to adapt called adaptive capacity. So many benefits come from operating in an ecological environment. So I just have a simple description here of managing in the complicated, and we lead through the complex, okay? So the performance iceberg, you've seen it before. You can kind of see where the leader operates is primarily in this more flowing space. You know, managers have roadmaps and leaders navigate oceans, right? So they're kind of sensing where to go based on the subtle cues that exist. And the goal is to actually be able to, oh shoot, my laser's not working here. Give me 1 second. To be able to recognize the value of seeing this dynamic of leaders translating the nuanced into the observable as a means of influencing, going back to Renata's research, and vice versa, the manager and the tangible and what is currently in place in an organizational policies, procedures, etc., also influence the beliefs, values, and attitudes underneath. This is the organizational dynamic, in my humble opinion. Okay, so moving forward, just quickly about how to create a leadership and management training program, because as hard as we try, it would be very difficult to disentangle completely, nor does it benefit the participants who then have to return to the real world space. So the opportunity, or there's 2 key ingredients in my many years of experience and application. The first is, how do we define the context we're working in? Meaning, is it simple and complicated where management capabilities will actually optimize the situation? Or is it more ambiguous and relationally based? All right, the ecological side, if you will. And how do I recognize I'm in that context? That's part 1. And then 2, how do we train participants to recognize and then shift to operate effectively in that domain? I might refer you to David Snowden's work. His Cynefin model is absolutely on the right track. I think there are opportunities for improvement, but he's got it. So how do we operate between these various domains? So simply put, many of you on the call are familiar with competency models, so I'm not going to belabor that, but I will say that having models as part of the leadership and management development programs, that you are within every activity leveraging what are the procedural, more management related, the grounding aspects, and what are the more adaptive. And in my previous slide, I think I talked about the safe to fail. I didn't, did I? Yes. On the creating safe to fail. What I mean by that, especially in nuclear, there are many opportunities where, many necessities where we can't fail. because failure is harm. So it's critically important that we have our workforce in environments where it is safe to fail. It is safe to experiment. It is safe to navigate and learn new behaviors and maybe even evolve existing protocols, procedures, etc. So how do we create these learning opportunities, our development programs, that actually foster this safe to fail environment? And then finally, here's just an example of kind of this embedded approach of helping also the participants recognize this very distinct capability set of leadership behaviors and management. We can easily start integrating those into one competency model. And I've just pulled communication out as an example here. Communication is, of course, paramount to management and leaders, but you see the distinct movement of each. To summarize pretty, at a high level, but to make it clear. This pen. Here we talk about managers are about actions. It's activities that must be complete, and it's about processes. Where with leaders, it's about the behaviors that lend to influence and movement and change, as well as what those outcomes and results are. And then finally, the people and culture, and I would even say these nuanced elements that are data points. By the way, please don't use soft skills. There's nothing soft about them. These are critical skills that are imperative to not only seeing relationships among nuanced capabilities, but also among people. They're critical skills, and we really should unify around that message. So that's it. I'm going to stop sharing, and I look forward to hearing Vanessa's talk so we can chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
You're very welcome.
Greatly on time. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So now our third keynote speaker, Vanessa, could you share your screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
And in the meantime, I would like to invite attendees to put the questions in the chat form.
Yeah, don't worry. We have time after all three presentations to answer a question, to discuss together. This is the main goal of this seminar. So please be active on chat and ask questions for our panelists.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, now on small window mode, but
okay.
Yeah, it's better. Okay, great.
Trying to get it done. Are you seeing the notes or just the?
Yes,
yes.
as well.
I'm gonna try this again. It worked well a moment ago. So you can see my calendar and everything now, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me try this again. Let's see. Okay. It's showing on a separate screen. I don't know why it's doing that.
Yeah, if now you will change your, sharing, could you share in another screen where you probably have a presentation, opened in presenting mode?
Let me see.
Vanessa, when you share the screen on the fourth icon, exactly. Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, full screen. So it's interesting what everyone has already talked about, Lisa and Renata, and I won't use the word soft skilled necessarily, but we do find in the nuclear industry that developing leadership training can be a challenge for what we are having to do every day from a nuclear perspective. So I'll just start by saying, of course, as leaders in the commercial nuclear power industry, we have a unique responsibility. Every day we commit ourselves to, in our organizations to producing electricity reliably and upholding the highest standards of safety and performance. And of course, we do that through development of our leaders. So what we actually do, and I'll talk to you all about today, is we do teaching and learning of our leaders. We have a leadership development pipeline that I'll talk to you all about. And we also have leadership and effectiveness and team effectiveness, essential outcomes that we talk to our leaders about that work in the nuclear industry. And we also have a focus on what is called staying on top. And I explain more of what that means and the relation to our leadership development pipeline training that we do. So in the leadership development pipeline, what we have here is we have, excuse me, we have first line leadership essentials training that we do. And the audience, of course, is our first line supervisors with direct oversight of our individual contributors that are actually touching the plant. And so the seminar's themes is really around communications, standards, observations, coaching, integrity. It's around safety culture and that inspirational leadership to help raise the participants' leadership, attributes before they go back to a plant to, provide oversight of the workforce. And we also have the next level leadership training that where the audience is the second level, of course, right above the supervisors. And these individuals, we want to raise their leadership skills to a higher level. And the key things, and we have key themes that are along the same lines of IMPO, what is called IMPO 1505, our leadership and team effectiveness, our attributes. And I'll talk to you all about those in just a moment. And then we also have above that, we have our next shift manager, shift manager seminar. And these are individuals who are really in our at our nuclear plant, and they're operating the plant every day, making sure that, of course, that that when there are things that happen in our control rooms, if you will, that they know how to respond appropriately. But those individuals, they also lead other individuals and make sure that they create the environment so to where they can be relaxed in the event that there is something that occurs. They know how and when to take certain actions to make sure we maintain the stability of the reactor. And we also have nuclear department leader seminars where we have individuals who are going to be providing direct oversight of a specific function, such as in maintenance or in operations or radiation, radiological protection, chemistry, all those different departments. So we provide additional training to them as well. And we go all, as far as, having plant manager seminars, because of course we want to make sure we influence a plant manager to really, think about the holistic impact that they may have on the organization and their decisions and how it may affect how, other individuals when they're out executing work every day, how they may, how they may behave, if you will, and what are the values that they're creating within the organization through their leadership.
Vanessa, do you change the slides?
I am about to.
Okay, sorry, no, okay.
Yep, so thank you for that. So what I was going to talk to you about next is the IMPO 1505 leadership and team effectiveness. And I think Lisa and Renata spoke to this to some degree. And this is how we saturate that information in our, what we call the essential outcomes within the nuclear industry. So we have you have on the screen here leadership and effectiveness on one side, and then on the other we have, of course, team effectiveness on another side, and then in the middle you have the essential outcomes. Is what we're trying to achieve within a nuclear industry. Ultimately, of course, at the bottom of the screen on the essential outcomes, you see there, we want to achieve results. We really want to achieve sustained high levels of performance within the nuclear industry. And it's key to everything that, of course, that we do, because we're making sure that we protect the safety and health of the people at the plant, but definitely, within the public. So around setting direction, and I heard some conversation around this, of course, we've got to look at leadership and see how try to make sure our leaders know how to establish a clear vision and strategy. But then also it's important for us to make sure that our leaders in the industry be able to take that information after they've established a clear vision and strategy of where the direction they want an organization to go, that they can align the organization to be able to achieve those visions and goals by next maximizing the competencies of the individuals that they have within the organization, and then across the organization, and then how well they work together to make sure that they understand their roles and responsibilities. So of course that includes the development of talent, for example. Leaders, we share that leaders are responsible, part of their job, at least 50% of their job, is to develop the people that work for them or across the organization. And it's important, of course, for them to do that because, as we're finding now in the nuclear industry, we have individuals who are deciding, they want to retire for some reason. Like myself, I did that after being in nuclear for 28 years, and then I came to work for the Institute. But others are doing the same thing, and they're kind of moving on to do things like lay out on the beach. So we have to get the experience that they have before they leave and make sure we transfer that information to other individuals that are coming along. So through that, of course, we're fostering our attempt, of course, a strong attempt is to foster that a learning, make sure we have a learning organization. Next, of course, another essential outcome is we engage the workforce. Now, our leaders in the organization, it's important for them to have strong abilities to be able to inspire and motivate and communicate the messages necessary to alert the workforce of, the types of risk that might be within the day-to-day activities that they have, being able to get into the hearts and minds of those individuals. So when they decide, or when they realize they have to go and touch the plant, if you will, that they touch the plant the right way so they get the right outcomes. We have to, really make sure that we create a positive atmosphere of mutual trust and respect. So really the way that we do that, of course, is that constant interaction with our workforce, but also when we have those leaders in the IMPO building, when we're teaching them those leadership courses, we're trying to, translate to them how important it is that they create that positive atmosphere of trust and respect, because how individuals, the workforce, feel day to day is very impactful to how they may behave and how they value the work and executing it the right way to the highest level without taking, I would say, shortcuts, because it could be detrimental, of course, in the industry that we're in. Next, of course, I've talked a little bit about it, but cope with risk. So we really want to make sure that our leaders, as well as our workforce, they have a really good understanding of what it takes to manage risk. It may seem easy for individuals to make lower level decisions, but it's not as easy and cut and dry, if you will, in the nuclear industry. And so it's important that we shape the minds of our workforce as well as our leaders every day. So, for example, we have individuals, of course, that are, they may have an equipment issue that they're dealing with. And this may be associated with a safety component that supports the reactor in some way. And we want to make sure that they make the most conservative decision possible. If that piece of equipment is possibly challenging the station's or the plant's reliability, do you bring the unit offline today? Do you, down power the unit to be able to fix that equipment today, or do you wait 30 days? What is your decision making in that? So in our leadership training courses, we want to help our leaders when they, before they go back to the plants or after they've been there for some time, we want to help them help shape their ideas and their approach to how they may cope with risk, if you will. And of course, achieve results is how they've done all the other things well. If they do coping with risk well, and they engage the workforce well, they maximize competence and set direction well. Generally, what we see in the nuclear industry is that stations achieve and sustain results. And what we're seeing across the industry, the nuclear industry now, both domestically and a lot internationally, is we're seeing high levels of performance. Okay. So we've talked a little bit, of course, about the leadership and the team effectiveness. And here the arrow in the middle is the management model. And in the management model, of course, we have what is called the defined the processes and procedures, management systems, resources. We have individuals who come in and, of course, they do internal as well as external oversight input. We are individuals, we have teams of individuals that go to the different nuclear plants, and we do external oversight to make sure, just to, I would say, evaluate a station's ability to be able to maintain high levels of performance, and we provide them feedback on a periodic basis. So when we see where leaders and teams work very well together, and they execute their management model well, we also see high levels of performance, and their overall organizational effectiveness is very high. So I mentioned earlier, staying on top. So this is an initiative that has been, we have been really pushing, of course, across the industry to further, to make sure that the organizations or the nuclear plants and the leaders within that nuclear plants, as well as the workers, they maintain, they advance the culture of continuous improvement, always looking to learn, always taking every opportunity to teach, taking every opportunity to find lower level behaviors that may not be where we want them to be from an excellent standard. And when we find those, what actions do we take to address those before, they become bigger problems? Because what we found, of course, is individuals, behave a certain way because they have a certain belief. And so what we're wanting to do in these areas, of course, is shape the right behaviors and values and beliefs within an organization through leadership to have that idea of, we want to continue to improve. And so what we've done in this with staying on top, of course, is we're looking to see how well organizations set long-term direction. Do they have a vision? Do they have a long-term strategic vision? Have they made sure that, the leaders and the talent that they have within the organization have the ability to be able to make sure that the organization can achieve that long-term vision that's been established? Does the organization have the standards, across the organization, whether it be the senior, the site VP, the plant manager, the mid-level manager, the supervisor, the workers in the field? Do they all demonstrate the same types of high-level behaviors to make sure that that the organization can, achieve that direction, that long-term direction that has been set? Continuous learning, what we really talk about in continuous learning is really about, the reverence for understanding the past so you don't repeat it. So we go in and we evaluate whether or not an organization uses operating experience well. Do they benchmark, each other, or are they more insular? And with them being insular, they haven't always developed that culture of continuous improvement. So that's another thing that we do in our leadership programs, is really to get them to see the importance of knowing what other stations, what other stations have learned, how they learned it, and how they can continue to advance their organizations as well. And then lastly, here we're staying on top, is around self-awareness and self-correction. So self-awareness and self-correction is in the title itself, of course, is when, making sure that the station and its leaders have the ability to be self-aware of the things that are going on. And that might be people related, and that may be equipment related. So we go from the standpoint of self-awareness and looking at people. We have observation programs, of course, that we use, but we want to make sure, we like to, as an evaluative group of people, we go in and see, we take a look at how the organizations look at that observation data, how they interact with the people within the organization, and when they get that observation data, what do they do with it? Do they turn it around, and say, oh, okay, we have issues in this area, lower level issues. Let's take action to go and address this. And it may just be because there is a knowledge gap, there's a skill gap in executing certain types of activities. So we want to make sure before it becomes consequential that we address those issues. And that leads me right into the self-correction. So we look at the timeliness of how leaders respond to those lower level issues, so that the culture itself is one that's continuously looking for opportunities to advance. So I think a lot of what, of course, we're talking about here today is covered in setting the long-term direction, leadership and talent development, excellent standards, continuous learning, and self-awareness and self-correction. And that's really what I want to share with you all today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Once again, thank you very much for all three presenters. And what I can remark, that we are quite aligned in the question of aligning leadership with organizational dynamics. And it was wonderful to see that there is really this understanding of the importance to acknowledge, to take into consideration managerial system, cultural system, and all these internal dynamics to be effective leadership. So really glad to hear this presentation. And now we have around 20 minutes for discussion with audience, and we have already a few questions on chat. So how would like you to proceed, Emilia? Do you prefer that we give the floor to audience, that they can ask their questions themselves, or we can just read it from chat?
I see actually that Lisa was very active already on the chat and answered a few questions. So there was one question from Callum, actually, how we can, instead of saying soft skills, what are the other terms that we could use to name the important skills? And Lisa answered that are the critical skills is the one option to name it. There was the question from Miroslav. Miroslav is actually Human Resources Director of the Slovenská elektrárna. So great to have you here, Miroslav. I believe there was the question on, maybe I will read this question quickly, and to ask maybe others if they would like to also develop some answers on this. I really appreciate your emphasis on importance of critical soft skills for managers and leaders. Unfortunately, those skills are often underrated and undervalued by the organizations in the succession planning or development of employees. Hard skills are deemed for far superior, and to achieve the shift in this perception is very difficult. What actions would you recommend to overcome this?
Okay, maybe Vanessa, Renata, would like to share your truth about it?
So Lisa answered that that safe to fail developmental opportunities are a great way to raise decibel of nuanced cues. And this is what she always, always, I mean, very often also says to her participants in the program, that we want to hone their Sherlock capabilities. Maybe Lisa, you want to also develop a bit about it, a bit more, if you wish.
Well, I won't take up too much time since I've responded so much in chat. Basically, we create scenarios that allow participants to start noticing intentionally subtle cues that are placed within the environment, and how that shifts their whole problem space and decision-making capability. So would love to talk more, but I'm going to turn the floor over to others right now.
I am not sure I understood the question. Can you repeat the question, please? Because I was listening carefully.
I will maybe activate now Miroslav if he's ready to repeat his question and make it maybe a bit more clear.
I think that he, because I tried reading, but I didn't.
So he has to accept being presenter to the webinar.
Right skills, I didn't.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me now.
Yes, very well. Hello, Miroslav.
Hi. Well, we've been dealing with this issue of training of leaders quite often in the past couple of years, and we've done a couple of internal surveys as to what traits leadership should have, and very often the hard skills of that leader manager will put on top, whereas critical skills or soft skills were not mentioned at all as important for the leader. How good an engineer someone is was far superior as to how capable he is to motivate people, to lead people, to have the right skill set in that area. And that from my perspective, led to very unfortunate cases where, people felt not motivated. They felt, that the team did not perform well because it was not enough for the manager, the director to have the hard skills only. But that understanding is not general, and it's very hard to convince not just the managers, but also members of the team that, we need to develop those critical skills, and we need to actively train leaders to perform better. So those skills are undervalued, and we are not meeting. We often encounter sort of resistance. We tell them, what trainings would you like to take, or what would be useful for you? And they would always say, this kind of hard skill training or conference or something. Soft skills are. Sometimes I feel we need to push the soft skills and leadership training into, some of our leaders. So how to overcome that resistance? That was the gist of the question.
I will take the opportunity quickly to, probably 15 years ago at Los Alamos National Laboratory, we had a new leadership team that had the courage and the insight to remove the incumbent whole first line management crew. And they, of course, staged it, but they did it because the data showed that managers, particularly at that critical role, who demonstrate those critical skills, retained their staff. So the agency took the step of putting everyone through a program. I was responsible for its development, where it was situationally bound scenarios that embedded the absolute learning and reinforcement and practice on these critical skills.
If I may add something, Miroslav, I'm not sure if this is going to satisfy you, but in light of what I said in my presentation, I think that maybe one way of doing it is to defocus from the individual leaders' skills and explain to these people that their success as leaders is not necessarily only linked to their individual characteristics. This is the message that I was trying to pass, that leadership is a very complex process embedded in a lot of different things and interactions in the organization. So for leaders to be effective leaders, they need to understand what's going on around them, and basically what what are these mechanisms. So what are the sources of lack of trust, for example? What are the sources of these insatisfactions in the team and so on? So, because it's very often not linked to their personal characteristics, but to the dynamic in the team and in the organization. And that's why we have this discussion here. So I think that we should probably make an effort to make them feel a little bit less guilty, but make them more, I would say, I don't know what word to use, aware of what's going on in the team. Because there's very often a sort of like a hierarchical barrier between the people that we call leaders, that are higher in the hierarchical ladder, and their subordinates. And very often they don't understand what's going on in these overall dynamics. So that's why I think that the refocusing attention to the organization, to the team dynamics, to all this complexity, and kind of defocusing from the individual characteristics is probably the way to go.
Thank you.
One thing I will share too, I found, like I shared earlier, I've been in nuclear for 28 years working at a nuclear plant, and what you're describing is and I think the other ladies on the webinar have also described is we are very engineering focused, and you may not always have that skill set for those critical skills that are important to many of the individuals that are working for these individuals who are so engineering focused. What I've found, as in my experience, to kind of overcome the resistance is kind of target those individuals who are more weighted to behave in a way that supports the critical types of behaviors that we're looking for. When we can influence and talk to those individuals and then help them to see the benefits of of influencing others also at their level, then we start to see the change move across the organization. And because it's like, and I think someone said earlier, it's almost like you have to create a safe space for them to let them know it is okay to behave in this way, even in nuclear. And because I think it's so important for us, because what we're now starting to see is a shift. Like I said earlier, there are individuals who are now leaving the organization, they're retiring. We have a more youthful group of individuals coming through, and they are looking for places where they like their managers. I want to make sure I like my manager. So do I really want to come to work, or do I want to just quit this job and stay at home? So it's important that that type of leadership, really abounds within an organization. And we're really starting to focus on that more here at the Institute.
If I may add something, and I will be a little bit controversial here, and for me, an ideal organization, and obviously you guys work in the nuclear environment, so it's going to be really controversial. But for me, an ideal organization is an organization where we don't need leaders, because people know what they're doing, and they of course, I'm just pushing things here, of course, but leaders are there to give sense to what people have to do, and to the collective action and so on. So basically, if they do their job correctly, people can lead themselves a little bit.
Absolutely. I agree.
I'm going to turn that around a bit though, Renata, and argue that it says the same thing, but coming at it differently. That rather than continuing to equate the term leader with our incumbent managers at the highest level, that we recognize and encourage and nurture the very necessary leadership capabilities within the entire workforce. I mean, if we want accountability within the organization, it seems that is the next step.
If I may just step in, Lisa, because that reminded me of one initiative that we started, and that is to give an annual leadership award to our employees. But we don't give it to any of the managers or directors. We're trying to find leadership examples, among first line workers, and then on an annual gathering of our employees, we present them the award and tell them what made what actions and what attitudes and approaches were worthy of this award. So we're basically saying what you said. We need to find leaders everywhere. It's not a matter of the function, it's a matter of the approach and certain qualities. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Miroslav. We have a further questions, and now is a question from Melis Kilitz. In general opinion, managers has to top-down approach. After your fruitful presentations, could we say that leadership actually contains bottom-up approach in complex organizations, or leadership should belong only to the characteristics of managers? If no, could you explain a little bit more, please?
I am personally against this approach of characteristics of managers, because if you redefine leadership as the influence process that is embedded in the very complex organizational dynamics, it refocuses attention from the characteristics of leaders and focuses attention on how to create organizations where this bottom-up leadership among the different employees can emerge. And it also has advantage of reconsidering this commonly accepted belief in naturally occurring leadership skills, because in this perspective we can consider that leadership is something larger than just a few personal characteristics of one person, right? So I would definitely, kind of in line with what I said, I would definitely consider that good leaders are people who can influence other people to become leaders as well, and basically the area of action is I would say kind of focused on creating the teams and the different processes and so on, so that they don't always have to be there from top down and controlling, and so the system is self-regulating a little bit more than what we could possibly see in a very top-down organization, centralized and top-down.
I would share that, I agree with what Renata is sharing, is saying. The challenge that comes with that, though, is within nuclear, we find that you may have an organization, if we have an organization that is not performing as well as it should, from the standpoint of excellence, it may be that we have to have more directive style leadership. Not what we would want to have as an end result, of course, but we have to have that directive style leadership to make sure that we have the required behaviors of the organization, because we do have a nuclear plant to run. Right. But to your point, though, when you get to a place where you have individuals who understand their roles and responsibilities, they have the high levels of knowledge and skill that they need to be able to execute their work, and they can work more independent. We try to shift the organizations to what we call facilitative leadership. You know, where the leaders, I would say the more managerial level individuals are sitting back and just observing and making sure the things that they expect to happen are actually happening within the organization, and they engage where they need to when they need to, you know, increase the level or pull back. But the organization itself functions at a high level.
Right. So this kind of links to this idea of the balance that we have to find, because obviously I'm pushing the you know, conceptualizing a little bit. You work in very regulated environments, and obviously I'm of course I'm completely conscious of the difficulty, but one does not exclude the other. I think that we should be doing both at the same time, because when small problems arise and weak cues appear that can very quickly lead to accidents or to undesirable events, we need people locally to be able to take the lead and resolve these problems, absorb them, resolve them, and they need autonomy for that, because sometimes we only have seconds to react.
I'm going to compliment, I hope, both of you, and I attempted to allude to it in my presentation. It's not an either or, it's a what is happening. It's a contextual decision. And an effective manager leader knows when it's important to command and control and when a more adaptive and flexible approach is called for. And in my mind, that is our opportunity for leadership development, is how do we help our workforce, the entire workforce, understand how to effectively read their environment and apply management and leadership. I do think there are capabilities, actually, Renata, with the leaders being more adaptive and flexible and relationally based. So how can we create these leadership opportunities that build these capabilities, these capacities? Thank you.
Right. A big issue, big problem.
Opportunity.
Right.
So additionally to these two questions, there is also a further discussions on how we should name the skills, soft skills, hard skills, critical, critical technical, critical interpersonal, interrelational. I think this Lisa answered very well. But now I see there is one question coming from Matthias. As a leader in a nuclear developer organization, how do you manage the stress of what is expected from you by the top managers? And I would say it will be the last question.
Well, I eat cake.
I don't work in a nuclear power plant, so I don't eat cake.
well, I would say if I heard you right, handling the stress of working in a nuclear plant, really, it is. I would say one of the ways that I was able to do it was having I would say a group of individuals that I could go to when I just needed to have a conversation and be able to be in a safe space, of course, and staying out in front of what you know is going to occur, what's planned, but always being prepared for what might come. And then, of course, exercising in the afternoons so you can, you know, kind of get ready for the next day. But that's, I mean, handling as when you are doing your own work, you know, yourself, it's one thing because you can manage it. But when you're providing oversight, if you will, for others in the nuclear industry, in the nuclear industry, it is important. And we talked about this earlier. It's important to really understand what everyone's capabilities are. So that way, when work, you know, the things that are on the schedule, when they come up, you know that they can get exercise completed, if you will, to the highest level. And there's little engagement that you have to do. Not developing your people in the nuclear industry and feeling confident, being confident about their capabilities will cause a lot of stress. So I think in leadership training, it's the idea of, you know, communicating to leaders, managers or what have you about development of people is as being 50% of your job, It's something that should continue to happen so they can make sure that individuals can, go and execute their work. And then you don't have to be as stressed because now you can focus on something else that's coming. Just a thought.
I think that I have just one comment to add very shortly. Delegating authority, decision-making authority to people obviously delegates the stress as well, right? So that's why we work in teams, and that's why we have communication, as you say, collaboration and mutual help, I would say, because sometimes the stress on the individual is too high.
You're not in it alone at all.
Exactly.
Okay, I see there's a 2:30. So Natalia, if you allow me, I will conclude the meeting. Thank you very much for all of you. I saw also the enthusiasm that you were also performing and answering all the questions. So I hope you enjoyed also this webinar. Thank you very much to all the attendees for active participation. And as I mentioned, ENS is really Learn Society. We're bringing nuclear professionals, and for us, development, human resources development and professional development is also very important. Therefore, we will definitely focus a few more webinars on this subject, and we hope to welcome you at another webinars dedicated to this subject. So thank you very much to all. Thank you for this webinar, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.